All right. Talk about the Oakland crime situation and basically what you all have seen.
Well, what I've seen is that there are a group of youngsters out there, young men, that are just shooting, and they're supposedly they're shooting against each other or with each other for various things that have happened over the years, and they're trying to settle it. It's like retaliations with homicides and shootings that have happened to each side of these two particular groups that's shooting, and unfortunately, with the high-powered weapons that they're using and the automatic weapons, other people are being shot, and innocent people are dying and being wounded because of all of this turf battle that's going on. And with these automatic weapons that now the president is talking about, they're using these weapons and they're firing up to 100 and 140 rounds at every event. So the streets are not safe in the sense that even if they were shooting each other, which would be bad enough, but the bullets in excess that they're shooting, just spraying areas, are now causing innocent people to die. You know, the Hiram Lawrence, the little Hiram Lawrence, barely 18 months old. The Carlos Nava, the Gabriel Martinez, the grandmother Ramona, and you could just go down the list with a lot of innocent people being shot and being wounded because of a lot of this shooting. So there's not enough police officers to really protect and serve the community the way they should, because with 600 police officers that we have, there's only about 200 that's actually able to patrol our city streets, which everybody knows that that's not enough police officers to quote unquote cause our city to be safe. And so public safety to me has to be number one as far as our mayor and our city council and others that lead our city to know that we need something done around public safety, and we need it yesterday.
Yeah, I think I would, if we're going to go this way, echo Bishop's sentiments on this. A sense of perspective on some numbers. In 2010, the last year of Ron Dellon's administration, we had 95 homicides in Oakland. 1 year later, we had 110. 2 years later, at the end of 2012, this past year, we were up to 131 homicides, 132 if you count using an automobile as a weapon. The one other metric that's worth noting in that same time period is that the size of the police department, as the bishop accurately represented, has continued to decline. And we are at, he would say it was around 600. I think we're at 613 officers today, but that includes the chief of police and his staff, and is top heavy with people, frankly, who don't do patrol. We have available to patrol 260 officers for a population of 400,000 people. These aren't random figures. There's a relationship between the increase in that kind of activity, and I just mentioned homicide. There's a whole host of other things that involve violence that we're not even counting with that. Not to mention crimes that never get reported because people think that the police won't be coming, that are involved here. And there's unquestionably gang involvement with this, and sometimes if we don't call them gangs legally, we might refer to them as groups as well, and individuals. But most of these people, although their behavior seems crazy to us, are in the end rational actors too, meaning they're not stupid. They might be crazy, but they're not stupid. They're rational people. And if they don't see a visible deterrence to that kind of behavior, they're going to engage in that behavior. All of us have had the experience of driving on the highway at a high speed in excess of the speed limit, maybe even the bishop, and suddenly when you see not really, and suddenly when you see a highway patrol car, you suddenly notice that there's a sea of lights, brake lights that go on. It's because the moment you see them, you don't want to get a ticket. You stop what you're doing.
That's right.
And it's the same thing. The bishop mentioned that poor woman, Ramona Foreman, a grandmother on International Boulevard in East Oakland, walking home in the evening as two cars came by shooting at each other. And a stray bullet hit her and ended her life.
Yes.
Ended her life. And you have to think that if there had been a patrol car on International Boulevard, somewhere in the vicinity of those two cars that night, that they wouldn't have been shooting at each other. It's that simple. It is true that you can't always arrest your way to a solution, but police provide more than arrests. They provide deterrence. And if we don't have enough police officers, and we clearly don't in Oakland, you're only going to see this rate of crime continue to increase. And that's where we are today. We're addressing that. We'll be talking a little bit later about what the council's doing, but believe me, we need a long-term strategy to this that involves serious resources that are not on the table right now.
I think it's worth saying a couple of things about the impacts of all of this. There's the obvious impact, which is on the victims of the homicides and their families, and those are tragic. But last year we didn't just have 131 or 132 murders. We had something like 600 plus shootings and woundings. And imagine the traumatic impact on that to the victims and to their families. We also have guns going off all over town where maybe the bullets don't hit anybody, and the impact of the people who live in those areas where that goes on, it just cannot be understated. It's just, or cannot be overstated, excuse me. It's just horrible. But there is another impact which doesn't rise to the same level, but is still worth talking about. And I hear about it in my neighborhood. I live in the hills. And I hear about this all the time, and the conversation I have had more times than I can count with my neighbors goes like this. This is absolutely the most wonderful city we know of. There are so many positive things going on here that we love. We have the best weather in the Bay Area, and probably the best weather in Northern California. Now, if only we could fix the tragedy of our crime situation. And to a certain extent, they're talking about burglaries and car clout and so forth. But for the most part, they are talking about what all of my neighbors consider to be the moral horror of what's happening with the shootings and the murders and the woundings. And something they all agree has to be done to make that stop.
Yeah.
4 years ago, there were 837 police officers in Oakland. Howard Jordan wants to see about 1,000. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, can I start?
Sure, absolutely.
First, a sense of perspective. This isn't a number that people just made up. There was a grand jury, I think, that looked at this. There was, I think there's a Department of Justice study on this. You look at other cities our size and look at who have comparable problems, what their police size is. We're constantly, for example, in this region, compared to the city of San Francisco. So a sense of perspective. San Francisco has about twice our population, 800,000 and change, and they have 4 times our police force, close to 2,400 officers. They're doing lateral hires right now, and by the way, we're at risk of losing some of our veteran officers to them because the climate's better over there, right? We have, as I said before, today we have 613 officers for a population in excess of 400,000 people. It stretches imagination to imagine that could be adequate to the task. So 1,000 officers is I think a minimum what we need. I think any of us would be happy to have more than we have now, but to really secure the city and to also control the cost of policing, you need to have a larger force. And let me just explain what I mean by that. If you have more police officers, then you have less need for overtime. You don't have people doing double shifts. If you have more police officers that can secure the city, then the business community feels safer. New companies want to come in. They bring jobs and tax revenues with them. And you also keep people and businesses from moving out. If you have more police officers and secure the city, you answer your social justice needs as well. Most of the violence in this city, the gun violence, is black on black, black on brown, brown on brown, meaning it happens in poor communities, and it happens to the poorest people in our community. Social justice, if that's your thing, should mandate public safety. Public safety is, in the end, and a sizable police department is part of the solution, is as the bishop mentioned before, a sine qua non of government. It's the most basic responsibility we have. If we can't secure the streets, if we can't have safety, then why are we here? What is the point? So that number is a real number, and I think even the consultants we're going to talk about a little bit later will, in a private moment, admit to you that that's the number that they need to see here too.
And when you look at the fact that you can call 911 and there's no response, sometimes there's not even anybody there to answer it because so many 911 calls come in all the time. And if you need an officer, police officer, to come to your residence because it's been burglarized, or you need an officer to come because you had an accident, it's almost not going to happen, and hasn't happened for the most part. There's so many 911 calls that went without answering just the other weekend. They said it was over 100 911 calls. Well, the main reason for that is they don't have police officers to dispatch to those to handle those 911 calls, which I think is a travesty. Because you don't know what emergency people are having, and when you can't call the police, to help you, which is what they're supposed to be able to do, what do? And the only thing I'm concerned about is more people taking matters into their own hands. You know what I'm saying? Getting their own guns and doing their own justice. You know what I'm saying? For what they would need to do, because there's no officers, no police officers to protect them. So it's kind of like going back to the old Wild Wild West, where whomever's going to get their gun the fastest, you know what I'm saying, will be the survivors. And we can't see us going like that. So getting more police officers, what I guess our frustration is, we don't understand why public safety is not priority or appears to be priority for the city leaders, and why they're not coming to the table to resolve this issue. There are some answers. There's some solutions to what we could do to better our situation right now, but it's like we don't really see that happening, and can't understand that. I can't understand it.
When Chief Batts was first here 3-4 years ago, something like that, he went around town putting on a slideshow of a study that he'd done. And one of the things that he showed was that our response time to 911 calls and our number of calls per shift were way out of whack on a per capita basis with any other city. And by that I mean to say that the number of calls was way higher, and the amount of time it took to respond was much lower. And that's when we were in excess of 700 police officers. Anybody you talk to who's a professional in the area of policing will tell you that what you need is not just a deterrent force. What you need is not just somebody to go out and investigate and somebody to go out and make arrests. You also need somebody to be working in the community and learning about what's going on in their beat in the community, and that is
to become a part of the community.
To become a part of the community, and that's what we talk about when we talk. One of the things we talk about when we talk about community policing is getting to know the people in your beat, getting to know a sense of what's going on. Well, you can't do that when you're spending all of your time racing around in a squad car, going to the most serious calls, and nobody's even going to the other ones. And until we we did not have that under control at 700 officers. We didn't really have it under control at 800 officers. All of the metrics that we've ever seen indicate that we ought to have a minimum of 1,000, and it makes sense for those reasons.
Well, do you think that maybe there's more to this than putting out 1,000 police officers? I mean, I don't know if you put 1,000 police officers on the street, that magically crime is going to be deterred a significant amount. Maybe it might. But what do you guys think?
I think there is a conglomerate of things that we need to do to really deal with with the whole issue, the big picture. But unfortunately, you have to start somewhere. And so I think beefing up the police force is definitely what needs to start, because there's no sense in going out. We've been trying to think about the ceasefire model. We've been talking about the ceasefire model. It worked in Los Angeles. It worked in New York, and now in Detroit, I think they're using the ceasefire model, and they're seeing that it does work. You can use it, and it's working. But the problem with the ceasefire model is that every police department that they work with at the ceasefire model, they all had their numbers up. They had adequate amounts of police officers. If we tried to incorporate the ceasefire model in Oakland, we don't have enough officers, because it works with the carrot and the stick. Okay, so we go out as clergy and we talk to the young men and we say, okay, you guys need to stop shooting up each other, stop killing up each other, or the police is really going to come down on you real hard. Okay, and so that's it. So right now they would just laugh at us, because everybody knows, including them, that we don't have enough police officers to have that stick, and so therefore we're just wasting our time talking. So until we're able to beef up the police force, so we do have a force to reckon with, then it's almost comical to talk about.
I completely agree with that. I think that almost every strategy, in addition to ceasefire, that we're trying, there's also a lot of, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Measure Y programs, social programs that we fund through parcel tax money, are designed to give people alternatives to do retraining, to deal with reentry felons. That's a separate population that's at risk for recidivism. When they come back out of prison, it's difficult to get a job with the prison record. We work with them. They're trying to do good things. But frankly, it's very easy to fall back into the life. And for those programs, even if they're working on all cylinders, you're not always going to catch everyone. So the question is, how do you complement those programs to begin with? And how do you sort of move us back to a place where a normal night is not, I only heard gunshots 3 times instead of 5 times. It should be, I never hear gunshots in any part of this community. And we're talking about guns, we're forgetting there are other forms of violence that happen and are used as well. We've moved to a new norm in Oakland, where I think in some ways we're almost desensitized to this violence, and so we're not shocked anymore. The first time a child was killed, there was outrage, but by the 7th or 8th time, there's sorrow and resignation, like this is just the way it is. And that's what I meant when I said we've moved to a new norm. So for me, the logic of an increased police force is not to turn the city into a police state and to create a state of siege with law enforcement. It is to regain control, basically, and to move that norm back to a place where violence is seen as it should be in a civil society, as aberrant behavior that won't be tolerated and absolutely should be deterred at all costs. You resolve your conflicts with words, not with fists and not with bullets. And we're not there today. And so to complement what the bishop said, if we don't have that visible deterrent, frankly, then all the social programs in the world aren't going to work. And it's really wonderful to have consultants come in and talk about strategies that worked in other cities, but as he correctly observed, New York had a fully staffed police department. Los Angeles had a fully staffed police department. Chicago had a fully staffed police department. All these places we've tried ceasefire and these other programs. And if we're going to invest time and effort and political hope in those things, why would we undersell them? It's like a 3-legged stool. It's going to fall over. Why would you undersell it by not giving the most important part, which is maximize your deterrence ability?
The other thing is the businesses are moving out of the city. So with the businesses moving out of the city because of the violence and the crime and all, where are we going to get the jobs when these young men do go through these programs and are able to come out of these gangs and stuff? Where are the jobs that we're going to give them after they go to these programs and all? If the businesses are all leaving, how are we going to get jobs? So it's just a real quagmire.
So as he said, you have to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere. That's it.
Bruce?
There's been a mantra in Oakland, a political mantra, starting about 10 years ago, that we don't just believe in police. We don't just believe in programs. We believe in a, quote, balanced approach, end quote. Professor Kennedy, who's the father of the ceasefire idea that was mentioned a few minutes ago, is famous for saying, people don't want a balanced approach. People want an approach that works. That means that there is a place for programs, but that's programs that are proved to work. And there is evidence from all over the country that a properly run police department with sufficient numbers of officers dramatically suppresses crime. We saw that in New York City, where the level of violent crime went down by something like 80%, I think was the number. We saw similar reduction in Los Angeles, and we saw it in Los Angeles with the number of officers going up, while 2 amazing other things were happening. The esteem in which the police department was held by the citizens there across demographic lines.
But also amongst marginalized populations.
And marginalized populations also rose dramatically. And the city brought itself out from underneath a consent judgment like the one that the Oakland Police Department is under right now.
I think they went from 2,000 homicides in New York down to 400.
Yes.
2,000 homicides a year down to 400. To me, we will do anything to bring the homicides down in the city of Oakland and the shootings. Because when you look at the 132 homicides last year and 555 shootings, when you add that together, it could have been 687 people that could have died last year alone. That's more than the people that died in Chicago. So that tells you what type of epidemic we have in our city.
We have another political mantra here, which is, well, you can't arrest your way out of a crime problem.
I hear that all the time.
Well, of course, but the fact of the matter is, while Los Angeles and while New York were making this kind of progress, they weren't arresting their way out of a crime problem. Their arrests and their imprisonment were going down.
Same in New York.
Same thing, both in New York and in Los
happening.
Angeles. It was deterrence. That's exactly right.
Okay, the city council as you know, took steps recently to try to fight crime in town.
Some of us were there until after midnight.
One of us was there till way after midnight.
know all about that.
Well, that's good. That's good to see. Keep you guys up late at night. Yeah. Of course, the biggest thing that happened was the contract to the consulting firm to help the Oakland Police Department, which included Bill Bratton and Bob Wasserman. First off, was that a good move or bad move by the city council?
Let me start by not necessarily agreeing with something that you said. I'm not sure the biggest move was that contract. I think the biggest move was the 3 steps that were taken to at least be small steps to immediately address the number of officers of some kind who are going to be out here.
Okay, why don't I go ahead and mention that then? I assume you're talking about the hiring of 11 county sheriff deputies for up to 180 days.
And the civilianization and the police academy.
20.
And the police academy,
So we
right.
also hired back some staff technicians and the like, 20 I think it was.
Yes, 20.
Okay, so what,
and
let's
then-
group
and
the
then
whole
funding
thing
the
together
academy.
and say, is this an effective move by the city council or not?
I'll start. Yes, it was. Some points of clarification, though, since you asked first about the contract. This is money the city had already voted to appropriate before, and now they're sort of going through the individual parts of this. Chief Bratton's name came into this, I think, unfortunately, and he's a polarizing figure, so he took most of the attention. But in point of fact, the contract, which was not a contract to give him $250,000, is a contract that's going to the company that Robert Wasserman, runs. He's the general contractor. Chief Bratton is one of several subcontractors that he has. And the main contract is with this company. So there are several consultants that we're paying, more than 2, by the way. I think it'll be 5 or 6 before we're done. They all have expertise and experience. And while we can question, how much money you should pay to consultants in the business world and government and the like, these numbers are not unusual. And frankly, if what they're doing, which is, I think, really more about reorganization of the police department, not particular police practices, but looking for economies of scale and efficiencies. If that produces some good results and reorganizing the department to deal with the needs of the community, these things are fine. We got focused on Bratton, and frankly, I'm going to lay a little of this at the mayor's office. I don't want to make this about the mayor, but Bob Wasserman wasn't talking about Chief Bratton. The city council wasn't talking about Chief Bratton. I think the administration mentioned Bratton's name because he's a high-profile figure, and there was an effort to sort of make them look like they're being tough on law and order, and they didn't think about the fact that he's associated with some policies in the past, stop and frisk being one of them, that are controversial. And that's the reason I think this went sideways. Remember, the contract is with a company. Bratton's one of several players in that. Bratton's not coming to teach us stop and frisk. He is a CompuStat specialist. He looks at how you squeeze the most efficiency out of the hours that you have your officers in the field. I think that's his primary focus here. And there'll be multiple other people. So if they make our force more efficient, especially with the small numbers we have, that's a good use of our money, frankly. And it complements the other strategies that we're trying to do, which is to get more officers on the street as quickly as possible. Because frankly, if we don't, it doesn't matter what Wasserman and Bratton and the rest tell us. It'll be battle plans that we don't have an army to carry out.
So we've just paid a lot of money for some advice we already knew before we paid the money. So, but right now, to be perfectly honest with you, we really don't have a plan. The mayor had a plan, 100 block plan. We don't know what happened to it. The chief had a plan. Every time you turn around, there's a new plan. There's a plan. None of them are working. So to bring in a specialist with some strategy, who's been in the trenches with this before, I think it's very wise to bring it in. I mean, nothing wrong with wise counsel. However, I just have a feeling he's going to come back after we paid all that money and say, you need more cops. That's what you need. And and we knew that before.
For $1.
We could have told him that free. Done that for a Big Mac. We could have told him that. So the point of it is,
there's your soundbite.
But there's not a lot of things that need to happen around this whole issue. One of the things, and I don't know if this is the right platform to talk about it, but we've been looking at county lately, and we noted that the Alameda County has a surplus of funds. You know what I'm saying? In the billions. And so the deal is, if they've got billions of dollars in surplus, the city of Oakland is a part of the county, and
We're the county seat.
yeah, and the city of Oakland pays taxes on our properties and whatnot. It seems to me the county ought to have a responsibility to share some of that surplus money that they have sitting around gathering dust and interest, by the way, and to reinvest it back into one of its main cities that's obviously having a lot of problems, more so than any other city in the county, to help us with our public safety issues. And I don't see that happening. So we're hoping to move that forward and try to facilitate some meetings between county supervisors and also with city council members, so we can expedite some sort of allegiance or some type of agreement around public safety, so they can help us in our real time of need. And this is really what we're hoping.
Let me add to that. First, on the contract, as Bishop Bob mentioned, in one sense you could say we've got all these public safety plans that are gathering dust, and there's an element of truth to that. On the other hand, the chief has acknowledged that he and the department do not have the resources to bring us a comprehensive public safety plan. And that's what this contract is intended to do. We have the assurance of Mr. Wasserman that this is not going to be a set of 3-ring binders with paper in them that go on a shelf someplace and join the Harnett study and some of the other ones we've seen in the past. The Harnett study was from 5 years ago and had, frankly, some of the same recommendations. But rather, his organization will be here for implementation. So it's going to be a study, and it's going to be recommendations, and it's going to be implementation on top of that. We need planning. We need all of the pieces of our public safety effort to be working together. And if $250,000 can get us that, that's fantastic as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Now, the other pieces, which are intended to provide us some relief in terms of officers available, one being confirmation of the next academy in September, one being taking some of the work being done by sworn officers and turning it over to lower paid civilians, and the third one temporarily borrowing 10 sheriff's deputies for a couple of shifts a week. Anything that makes more officers available on the street is a positive. There's no question about that. But it's important we remember that this is not a long-term solution. No. This is a decent Band-Aid, but it's still
a down payment.
It's a down payment. At most, it's a down payment.
That's all it is.
The city does not yet have a plan to get us back to the number of officers we had before, let alone the number of officers that we need. If you go and look at what various people in the city say, you'll sort of find two different versions of that. If you go to the last report on this subject from Chief Jordan last November, I think, you'll see that at most, through the academies that he hopes are going to be scheduled, you'll have a net increase of 20 officers per year. And you can just imagine how long that takes to get you to 1,000
Can I jump in? Just
jump in,
okay.
Please.
So right now we have 2 academies for this year that will be yielding results. One of them was started in September of 2012. We're about to graduate them a couple weeks from now in the upcoming month of March, and we'll start a new academy which will then graduate in September. Because the City Council funded a third academy in September, we'll be graduating those cadets in March of the following year, of 2014. So the yield we're going to get from these 2 cadet classes right now that we have in this year will come from those first two classes that I mentioned. And optimistically, in looking at this in the best way possible, the chief recruited 60 people for each class, 60 people certainly for the first class, out of a pool of 3,000 applicants, but they realistically expect to graduate about 40, right? If you get 40, and that would be optimistic, if you get 40 cadets out of each class, that's 2 classes of 40, you'll get 80 officers for the year. But as Bruce was mentioning, we lose 60 officers a year to retirement, to disability, to a whole host of reasons. All
transfers, other places.
Transfers, sure. Lateral hires out, whatever it's going to be. And the average is between 4 and 6 officers per month leave us. So in between those 2 numbers is 5. 5 times 12 months is 60. So if you're looking at the net yield of new officers we're adding with this program, it's 80 minus 60, 20 officers. If the chief needs 400 officers or 300 officers to bring us up to full force, you're only gaining 20 a year with this strategy, it's going to take 15 or 20 years. I'll be a great-grandfather before we have enough police officers in the city. And we can't wait that long.
And so many innocent people will have to die, be killed and dead.
That's the point.
If everything is allowed to continue the way it is. So we consider it a crisis. We really consider it a crisis. And there's something that must be done around public safety. And it has to be done now. We need it right now.
This is why Bruce was also saying that this is at best a Band-Aid or a down payment. I mean, if this is a sign of their intention, that's good. But as I said to you at the beginning of our talk today, the resources we need are not on the table right now. We need to be doing 4 or 5 academies a year. And that costs money and it takes political will. All the ingredients are here, but putting them together requires some management, and it's not just going to come from the consultants. It has to come from the mayor's office and the city council as well.
Well, that brings me to my final question then. Do you guys have confidence in the city leaders to come away from what's recommended from the consultants, the facts that they have, that they're going to do the right thing?
May I take that one first?
Yeah,
please. I think that confidence in city leaders is, I hate to tell you you're asking the wrong question, but confidence in city leaders isn't really the question. I think what's important is that the community bring the pressure to bear to ensure that those recommendations are going to be implemented. To this extent, we have an environment in Oakland right now that is a positive environment of a kind that I haven't seen since first moved here in the early 1970s. And that is that everybody is talking about public safety and that something has to be done about it. It is a universal subject everywhere any of us goes, whether it's in Bishop Bob's neighborhood or whether it's in mine. And those galvanized members of the public, once this recommendation is out, has to see to it that any politician who wants to have a future in this city, any elected official who wants to have a future in this city has to follow through on the recommendations that are made and have to bring us the public safety infrastructure, both in terms of numbers and in terms of structure, that this city desperately needs.
Well, I'll put it this way. I am encouraged that when there was a budget surplus, that some members of the city council took it upon themselves to say, if you've got extra money, let's spend it on public safety. I think that's a healthy sign. I'm encouraged that in spite of the huge outpouring of people who are opposed to either the giving of this contract to those consultants or who basically feel that the police are the problem and not the solution, and there is that camp of people in Oakland, that in spite of that, the council voted, I think it was 7-1 for one of them, for the contract, and I believe it was 8-0 for the other 3 measures, and there was political will. I was encouraged to see that the mayor showed up and was generally supportive of this as well, and wrote a letter saying we won't do stop and frisk, but we are going to pursue the consultant contract because we want those results. I think they're feeling the pressure that Bruce mentioned. And they understand that that's their responsibility. Now, it's one thing, though, to do that when you've got a little surplus. It's one thing to do that when you're sort of spending within your means for the year. It's another to say, well, we can do this for 15 years and then we'll get up the police force to what we need it to be, and hopefully the economy will improve and these problems will go away. And the sense of urgency about this, we are, as the bishop said, we're in a state of crisis today. We cannot afford to let this continue forever, because if it does, the violent crime narrative that is the news depiction of Oakland from the outside will continue for another decade. The lack of jobs, which are part of the problem to begin with in some of the poor communities, will not materialize in this city. If you want to fix our long-term problems, you have to start with the thing that's the cancer for everything. It's a point of intersection as well for everything. You get a multiplier effect if you provide safety here. And likewise, if you trickle this to death, you just drag it out, and in the meantime, you make this you make Oakland into Detroit, essentially. If there is a sense of urgency on the council, not just to use resources when they have a surplus, but to actually be bold and commit existing resources, more resources, to fix this problem faster, you'll you'll see a lot of confidence, I think, in government. And people will be very happy with the elected officials we have. Now, do they have the will to do that today? time will tell.
I think with the new council that we have, it certainly it's looking promising, because I just think that they are hitting the ground. They hit the ground running, and I think they have a better idea, better concept about public safety, and I think that we're going to see a tremendous improvement with the new city council people that are on board now. The other thing I wanted to piggyback on was the fact that the Bratton contract, the Wasserman contract, bringing on these strategists and these experts in the field. The other thing that they're promising to do is bring the community in as part of the dialogue, as part of the roundtable discussions as to what's the best way to solve Oakland's crime problem. And I think that's a first, because I've so many years wanted to be at the table, and I'm wondering who's making all these decisions for the community when the community is not really represented. So that's a part I think that's a real plus, at least that I'm looking forward to. I've been asked to sit on that board when they convene these groups and the meetings around public safety, and I'm excited about representing the community being there, because I think the community need a voice. So the contract has it's a lot different than what we've been used to in the city of Oakland, so I'm hoping for better results.